You probably know that Canada makes a lot of whiskey, and you've probably heard that the United States is preparing to place some pretty big tariffs on Canada and most other countries.
Whatever they tax us, we will tax them.
But I've got some questions. Like, who gets to decide what tariffs are charged? And if President Donald Trump wants to make whiskey a whole lot more expensive, is there anyone who can stop it? Tariffs have been all over the news in the past few months. Trump has repeatedly announced and then delayed them, including those tariffs on our neighbors in Canada and Mexico. Now, when and if they ever take effect, the tariffs will lead to big price hikes on products that cross North American borders, like Canadian whiskey, but also lumber and Mexican avocados and other fruits and vegetables, plus cars and lots of basic household items. So it might be helpful to start with the basics, like how do tariffs work? Visualize it like this. My buddy Gordon lives up in Canada, and he makes a lot of whiskey, but he can't sell it all to Canadians, so he exports some to the US. Now, since 1994, most products have been allowed to cross the Canadian and Mexican borders without any tariffs. That means that Brad, here in the US, can buy Gordon's whiskey and have it delivered from Canada without any additional costs, just like if it was crossing from Washington into Oregon. Now, Trump wants Brad to pay a tariff when the whiskey crosses the border. It's a bit like paying a toll. So say that this bottle of whiskey costs $20 at the grocery store. Under Trump's tariff plan, it now has to pay an additional $5 toll just to get into the country. And that will cause the price of whiskey to go up. And it's not just whiskey, of course, it's a 25% tax on everything that comes across the border. When you add Mexico into the picture, Trump is trying to charge higher tariffs on about $900 billion of annual imports. It's a tax on the American people. And if a president wants to raise taxes on Americans, typically he's got to get approval from Congress first. So how is it that the president can impose this huge tax increase on whiskey and lots of other stuff all by himself?
When we talk about taxes and whether or not we raise or lower taxes, Congress has the authority there. Congress is an independent, co-equal branch of government. Congress needs to say these are not things that the executive gets to decide unilaterally.
That's Representative Susan DelBene, whose district in Washington state is close to the Canadian border, which means that her constituents are likely to feel the sting of tariffs even faster.
What he did is going to raise prices for consumers everywhere. That means prices are going up at the grocery store, at the gas pump, at the pharmacy counter for families all across the country. And it's bad policy.
The Constitution gives Congress the final say over not just taxes, but trade policy too. However, lawmakers have given away that authority in bits and pieces since the 1940s. It was assumed that presidents would be more willing to look out for the nation's best interest and less likely to support protectionism for specific industries. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out that way. Now the president has vast power over trade, and Trump is taking advantage of that. There's been a number of bills going back, 50, 60 years, where Congress has kind of offloaded its trade authority to the executive branch. Do you think that was a mistake?
I do. I think Congress has to make sure it exerts its authority. We need it to be clear in statute, but we also need to make sure that Congress is acting. And this isn't a statement about any particular administration.
Presidents do have a constitutional role to play in trade policy. They're responsible for negotiating and signing trade deals that are subject to congressional approval. And presidents from both parties in recent memory have used that power to lower tariffs and create freer trade. That's why Brad has been enjoying all that tariff-free whiskey and all those other Canadian and Mexican goods since the 1990s, when Bill Clinton signed the North American Free Trade Agreement.
It's a good deal, and we ought to take it. Thank you.
The worst trade deal ever made by any country, I think, in the world.
Trump railed against NAFTA on the campaign trail in 2016, and then he rewrote the deal during his first term under a new name, the USMCA Agreement. And now he's trying to blow up that deal. The law that Trump is using to put tariffs on stuff from Canada and Mexico is called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. That's a mouthful, so we'll just call it IEPA for short. It was signed in 1977, so thanks a lot, Jimmy Carter. To activate its powers, a president has to declare a state of emergency, and that is where Representative DelBene says Trump is overstepping.
First of all, these are allies. These are not hostile foreign nations. And we have a trade agreement with both of these nations. So I have legislation to make it clear that Congress actually has the authority when it comes to tariffs and trade and taxes. Absolutely should not be one person making decisions, and we should understand the impacts of these decisions.
Until now, IEEPA has only been used to impose sanctions on foreign countries. Del Bene's bill would explicitly prevent a president from using IEEPA to impose tariffs. She's also sponsored a resolution to block these tariffs and to cancel the economic emergency that Trump declared in early February. Under the law, Congress would be allowed to end an emergency declaration, but that's unlikely to happen because the president can veto that resolution, even if the legislation passes. You probably noticed that Del Bene is a Democrat, and of course, Trump is a Republican, but this didn't used to be a partisan issue.
I believe in limits to executive power.
In the last Congress, a bipartisan group of representatives and senators introduced a bill that would curtail how presidents can use their emergency economic powers.
We ought to reassert congressional authority where it's necessary.
That bill, the Article 1 Act, passed a House committee in December, but it never got a full vote on the floor. But now that Trump's in office, Republicans seem less willing to get on board. We reached out to Representative Chip Roy, the chief Republican sponsor of the Article 1 Act, to ask why that bill hasn't been reintroduced this year. His office told us that they do intend to reintroduce the bill. It's just a matter of when.
I've been very vocal about congressional authority under a Democratic president or now under a Republican president. And frankly, there were a lot of Republican members of the House who were very vocal under President Biden, how important it was for Congress to have a say, and they're silent now. So that's where the hypocrisy is.
So why can Trump put these huge tariffs on stuff that we buy from Canada and Mexico? Because Congress gave away those powers, and Trump is not shy about using them.